All right, so today we're going to be looking into the work of Dan Winter.
Okay.
He's a researcher who's making some pretty wild claims about how the universe works.
Right.
We're talking about things like gravity consciousness, even teleportation.
Wow.
And what's really interesting to me is how he connects all this back to, ancient knowledge and sacred geometry.
Yeah.
It's definitely piqued my interest.
I can see why.
So we have this interview with him where he lays out all these theories. And in this deep dive, we're going to unpack those ideas. And then with your help, we're going to see if there's any science behind it.
Sure.
You ready to explore Dan Winter's universe?
Let's do it.
Okay. So the heart of his work is something he calls charge collapse.
Okay.
And he believes that this is the root of both gravity and consciousness.
Interesting.
Two things that seem completely unrelated at first glance.
Yeah, for sure.
He describes it as energy imploding inwards. But honestly, I'm still a little fuzzy on how that actually works.
Well, the idea of charge collapse itself is not entirely out there. Physicists are exploring similar concepts, especially those who work in quantum field theory.
Right.
They're looking into how energy can kind of concentrate and interact in ways that could potentially explain things like gravity.
So there's a possibility there.
Yeah, there's a kernel of scientific plausibility there, at least.
That's really interesting. But he doesn't stop there.
Right.
He goes on to say that the golden ratio, which is this mathematical proportion that you find everywhere in nature, is the key to understanding how this charge collapse happens. So if he's right, understanding this golden ratio could be the key to things like unlocking new energy sources or even manipulating gravity.
That would be huge.
Yeah, absolutely mind-blowing stuff. The golden ratio has fascinated mathematicians and artists for centuries. But what's especially interesting in relation to Winter's theory is its connection to fractals.
Right.
So these infinitely repeating patterns like branching in a tree or veins in a leaf, they exhibit self-similarity at different scales.
Right.
And the golden ratio often governs that structure.
Yeah.
And Winter claims that he's found this golden ratio encoded in all sorts of physical phenomena.
Wow.
From like the radius of a hydrogen atom to the orbits of planets.
Really?
He even developed an equation using Planck's constant powers of the golden ratio that he says can predict these values.
Interesting.
He also brings in this shape, the dodecahedron, which is that 12-sided three-dimensional shape, as the perfect embodiment of the golden ratio, tying it back to this sacred geometry and ancient knowledge.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, that's some pretty cool imagery.
It certainly captures the imagination. Some scientists are actually exploring whether fractals and, by extension, the golden ratio could be connected to gravity. It's still a fringe idea. But it does raise some pretty interesting questions about the fundamental structure of the universe. However, the idea that this one equation can predict such a wide range of phenomena, I think we need to take a deeper look at the scientific evidence behind that.
Yeah, for sure. So how does he explain how the golden ratio actually leads to this charge collapse? I mean, it's a mathematical concept, right? How does that translate into a physical process?
Well, he describes it as enabling what he calls constructive interference of energy. So you can imagine like waves coming together perfectly, their crests and troughs aligning, amplifying each other, and ultimately causing this implosion of energy.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get the picture here. But then he takes this implosion idea and connects it to all sorts of things, like the creation of hydrogen atoms, the function of DNA, even the possibility of faster than light speeds. He talks about zero-point energy devices, over unity energy production. It kind of sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. Is he pushing the boundaries of what's scientifically plausible here?
Well, the concept of constructive interference is well established in physics. But when you try to extend that to explain all of these phenomena, I think that's where Winter's theories get a little bit more speculative, faster than light travel and over unity energy production. Those things would actually violate some of the most fundamental laws of physics, like the theory of relativity and the law of conservation of energy.
So is he saying that these established laws might be incomplete?
That's his position, yeah. He believes that by harnessing this implosive energy and using the golden ratio as a guide, we could potentially unlock these seemingly impossible feats. But we have to weigh these claims against the huge body of evidence that supports those established laws.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So to support his claims, he shares some pretty interesting anecdotes. He talks about his friend, Tony Rodriguez, who uses crystals and obelisks to supposedly focus this implosive energy. He even talks about these fire crystals that are supposed to create this tingling sensation when you touch them because of this energy.
Interesting. Crystals do have unique structures, and they have vibrational properties, but scientific evidence for their ability to focus energy, the way that Winter describes it, is lacking. Subjective experiences like tingling sensations can be intriguing, but they can also be influenced by things like the placebo effect. People's beliefs and expectations can really affect their perception of sensations, especially when you're dealing with something like energy manipulation.
Yeah, for sure. So even if there's no measurable energy field, the power of belief itself might be creating the effect.
Right.
It's fascinating how our minds can influence our experiences like that.
Yeah, it really is.
This is where things get a bit controversial, though.
Okay.
Winter's pretty critical of other researchers in this field, like Dan Willis, who have different approaches to achieving this implosion.
Right. Well, this is a common tension in science between those who adhere to the established paradigms and those who are proposing these unconventional ideas and challenging those existing theories is super important for scientific progress.
Yeah.
But those challenges need to be supported by solid evidence and rigorous methodology.
Absolutely. It sounds like he's walking this fine line between pushing the boundaries of science and potentially venturing into pseudoscience.
Yeah.
It's definitely making me think, though.
Yeah, that's the value of exploring these ideas. They challenge our assumptions and encourage us to consider different perspectives, whether or not we fully accept Winter's claims. The process of examining them can be really intellectually stimulating.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground with Dan Winter's theories, charge collapse, the golden ratio, implosion, even the possibility of faster than light travel.
Right.
It's been quite a ride.
It really has. We've delved into some really fascinating and sometimes controversial concepts.
Yeah.
But we've only scratched the surface of Dan Winter's universe.
And there's a lot more to unpack. Stay tuned, because next we'll dive into some of Winter's more practical applications of his theories, like his ideas about pyramid power.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
All right, so we've explored some pretty mind-bending concepts from Dan Winter so far.
Yeah, we've been all over the place.
But now I'm curious about how he applies these theories to real-world applications.
Right.
He talks a lot about pyramid power.
Okay.
And honestly, that's something that always sparks my imagination.
It's definitely captured the attention of a lot of people over the years.
Yeah, for sure.
It's often been linked to New Age beliefs and alternative theories.
Right.
But Winter tries to ground it in his ideas about charge collapse and the golden ratio.
Right. He claims that pyramids can generate and transmit energy wirelessly because of their shape and especially their connection to the golden ratio.
Right.
He points to the Great Pyramid of Giza as an example, suggesting that its placement and alignment were carefully chosen to harness these energies.
Okay.
But you mentioned earlier that manipulating energy in this way might go against some pretty well-established laws of physics.
Yeah, that's right.
How does he address that?
Well, while the pyramids, and especially the Great Pyramid, do show impressive architectural precision and astronomical alignment, there's really no scientific evidence to support the idea that they have special energy-generating properties.
Right.
Winter's interpretation of pyramid power relies on extending his concept of implosive energy, suggesting that the shape of the pyramid focuses this energy somehow.
Okay.
But this explanation lacks the rigorous testing and evidence that you'd need to really validate it scientifically.
So are all those stories about people experiencing weird things inside pyramids?
Yeah.
Like heightened awareness or even physical healing?
Yeah.
Are they just a bunch of hooey?
Well,
I mean, there must be something to these accounts, right?
People do often report unusual experiences in pyramids.
Right.
But these can probably be explained by psychological factors. Things like the power of suggestion or just the mystique surrounding these ancient sites.
Yeah.
The human mind is incredibly susceptible to influence.
Right.
Especially in environments that evoke a sense of wonder or mystery.
So even if there's no actual measurable energy field,
right,
the power of belief itself might be creating the effect.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing how our minds can influence our experiences like that.
It really is. The placebo effect is a great example of that.
Right.
It shows how our beliefs and expectations can shape our perceptions and even influence our physiology.
So it seems like we have to be really careful to distinguish between subjective experiences and verifiable scientific phenomena.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, we shouldn't discount the impact of the mind on our well-being.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, so Winter doesn't just see pyramids as these passive energy things. He takes it a step further and talks about how this pyramid power could be harnessed to do all sorts of incredible things.
Like what?
He mentions zero-point energy devices.
Right.
Remember we talked about those earlier.
Yeah.
These theoretical devices that could tap into limitless energy from the quantum vacuum.
That's right.
Is there any scientific basis for those claims?
While zero-point energy is a real concept in quantum mechanics, the idea of actually extracting it and using it for practical purposes is still very speculative.
Right.
There are huge technological hurdles, and any claims that someone's figured it out, those have to be looked at very carefully.
Right. With a lot of skepticism.
A lot of skepticism.
Okay. Winter suggests that pyramids could be the key to accessing this energy. But again, this is an extrapolation of his theories without any concrete evidence.
Right.
He even brings up the idea of stargates.
Oh, wow.
Those portals from science fiction, that allow for instantaneous travel across vast distances.
Yeah.
It seems like he's venturing further and further
Yeah.
into the realm of imagination here.
Yeah, the concept of stargates is definitely firmly in science fiction.
Right.
While physicists are looking into the theoretical possibilities of manipulating space-time to allow for faster-than-light travel.
Right.
These ideas are really far from any practical applications of pyramid power.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that just because an idea is intriguing or exciting, that doesn't necessarily mean it's scientifically valid.
Okay, I need to keep reminding myself of that. So, are there any applications of pyramid power that Winter talks about that are a little more grounded in reality?
Like, what are you thinking?
Well, he mentions things like enhancing plant growth or improving water quality using pyramids. Yeah. Those seem a bit more plausible.
Well, various environmental factors can definitely influence plant growth and water quality. But saying that those benefits come specifically from pyramids, that lacks scientific support.
Right.
We'd need controlled studies to isolate the effects of the pyramids from all the other variables and to establish a real causal link.
So it seems like there's a pattern here.
What's that?
A lot of interesting ideas,
right,
but not much scientific evidence.
Yeah, it sounds like Winter is kind of positioning himself as a maverick, pushing the boundaries of what's considered acceptable in the scientific world.
It makes you wonder if he's onto something, though, right?
Well, it's definitely good to challenge existing paradigms and explore alternative explanations, but those challenges have to be grounded in solid methodology and verifiable evidence.
Absolutely.
And that's where Winter's work sometimes falls short.
Okay.
It relies a lot on theoretical interpretations and anecdotal evidence.
But even if the evidence isn't quite there, there's something about his approach that's really captivating.
What do you mean?
Well, he's connecting these ancient structures and wisdom traditions with modern physics. It creates this feeling that there's more to the universe than we currently understand.
It's that sense of wonder and the desire to explore the unknown that really drives scientific inquiry.
I agree.
And while it's important to be skeptical of Winter's theories, there's also value in thinking about how his ideas might spark new research or challenge us to think about the universe in new ways.
Yeah, for sure.
His work highlights this really fascinating intersection between science, spirituality, and ancient mysteries.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
He even suggests that the ancient Egyptians might have understood these subtle energies and encoded that knowledge into the pyramids.
Wow.
Do you think there's any truth to that?
Or is he just romanticizing the past? While ancient cultures definitely had impressive knowledge of astronomy and math, to say they had a deep understanding of energy fields or quantum mechanics, that's a big jump.
Yeah.
I think we have to be careful when we interpret ancient beliefs and practices and avoid projecting modern scientific concepts onto the past.
Okay, so we've explored Winter's ideas about pyramid power, zero-point energy, even stargates. And we've talked about the lack of scientific evidence, but also the allure of these unconventional theories. Where do we go from here?
Well, one area we haven't really touched on yet is Winter's research on the connection between consciousness
Yeah.
and the golden ratio.
Wow.
He has some really fascinating ideas about how our thoughts and emotions might actually be influenced by this mathematical proportion.
So he's saying our feelings have a mathematical basis.
That's what he's suggesting.
That's definitely something I need to wrap my head around. Let's dive into that next.
Okay, I gotta say, this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah. He's been talking about the golden ratio being like embedded in the physical world. But now he's saying it plays a role in consciousness too. Our thoughts, feelings, even spiritual experiences.
Right.
How does he even start to connect those two things?
Well, he builds on this idea that our brains operate on principles of fractal geometry,
Okay.
similar to those patterns we see throughout nature.
Right.
And he suggests that the golden ratio is fundamental to this structure. And that's what allows consciousness to kind of emerge.
So if our brains are like these super complex fractals, all governed by the golden ratio, is he saying that that's what makes us conscious?
Yeah.
That it's literally the mathematical key to awareness?
He doesn't exactly say that the golden ratio causes consciousness.
Okay.
But he does connect this fractal nature of the brain to these higher level functions like creativity, intuition, even these moments of deep spiritual insight.
Wow.
He suggests that these states of awareness are somehow linked to these golden ratio patterns within our neural networks.
So it's like our brains are these finely tuned instruments, and when they resonate at this golden ratio frequency, we tap into something much deeper, something beyond our normal everyday awareness. Is there any science to back this up?
Well, there's a growing body of research looking into the role of fractal patterns in brain activity, but the specific connection to consciousness and the golden ratio is still pretty much unexplored. It's definitely a fascinating area for future research.
Right.
But we need more evidence to really understand how this mathematical proportion might influence our experiences.
He also talks about these ancient wisdom traditions, like meditation and chanting, as ways to maybe tap into this golden ratio frequency.
Interesting.
He suggests that these practices might be training our brainwaves to resonate with this fundamental cosmic pattern. It makes you wonder if those practices are aligning us with the universe on like a mathematical level.
There is some research showing that certain sound frequencies or rhythmic patterns can actually influence brainwave activity. They can induce states of relaxation or focus, or even altered consciousness. But whether these practices are specifically attuning us to the golden ratio, that's still an open question.
So once again, we've got this really cool idea that needs more research.
Right.
But even if the evidence isn't there yet, there's something powerful about this idea that something as fundamental as math might be behind our consciousness and connect us to the larger universe.
Absolutely. It speaks to this deep human desire to find order and meaning in the world.
Yeah.
And while Winter's theories are often speculative,
Yeah.
they really tap into this yearning for a deeper understanding of our place in the cosmos.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in Dan Winter's universe.
We really have.
Charge collapse,
The golden ratio.
gravity consciousness, pyramids, zero-point energy, even teleportation.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. It's been mind-bending for sure.
Full of bold claims and really thought-provoking ideas.
I think what I'm taking away from this
Yeah.
is this sense of awe and wonder that Winter inspires.
Right.
Even if some of his theories are never proven scientifically, he's given us a whole new way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
A world where math and energy and consciousness are all intertwined.
In ways we're just beginning to grasp.
And maybe that's his most valuable contribution.
What do you mean?
To make us curious again.
Yeah.
To reignite that desire to explore and ask questions.
I think you're right.
He's reminding us to challenge our assumptions and to never lose sight of the mysteries that are still out there.
Well said.
He's definitely given us a lot to think about. So to everyone listening out there, we encourage you to check out Dan Winter's work for yourselves. Keep those minds open and never stop asking those big questions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.